Well, I want to welcome everyone to today's special Friday the 13th Friday Power Lunch. I'm Robbin Warner, affectionately known as the Show Wizard, and on this lucky Friday the 13th, we're going to do something completely different. We are hosting the Virginia Grassroots Coalition 2023 Legislative Session Press Conference. Louisa Boyarsky, the leader of our Grassroots Coalition, will be hosting the press conference, so please join me in giving Louisa Boyarsky a big Friday Power Lunch welcome as she introduces the Virginia Grassroots Coalition 2023 Legislative Session Press Conference. Louisa, I'm handing off to you.
Well, thank you so much, Robbin. It is great to be here with everyone. What a great week to be starting off our press conference. So what I would like to do is say, as you heard in our opening song, we've got a theme for this legislative session, and it is "We Won't Back Down." We are thrilled with the momentum that we have going into the 2023 legislative session after our big wins on Tuesday night, securing House District 35 for Democrats and flipping Senate District 7 from red to blue. It was a historic night. Aaron Rouse's win marks the first time that a Democrat has won Senate District 7 in 27 years, and Jade Harris in House District 24 outperformed McAuliffe and Biden at the ripe age of 25. As you can see, Gen Z is building a blue foundation in this rural area. I want to thank all of the activists and legislators who supported these special elections. We are hoping to build on this momentum during the legislative session. And now for our press conference. We will begin with presentations on key priority bills for the 2023 session, and then have a discussion with Senator McClellan, Senator Boysko, and Delegate Rasool about what to expect to see this session and the important legislation they're working on. We're going to wrap up with Q&A, so if you have a question for any of the speakers, please put it in the chat. If there are other legislators who have joined us for the press conference, we will bring them up on the screen to join us for the Q&A and the after chat. So for those of you who don't know us, the Virginia Grassroots Coalition includes more than 50 grassroots groups and represents more than 15,000 Virginia voters from around the state. Our members work on issue groups to help draft, review, and prioritize legislative bills that we hope will pass this year. We are pleased to share some of these bills with you today, including legislation that promotes clean and affordable energy, provides more funding for public schools, advances gender equity, and reforms the process for recalling elected officials. We are also working with our legislators to identify which bills will roll back gains that we have previously made in areas including reproductive rights, transgender rights, voting rights, criminal justice reform, and gun violence prevention. The addition of Aaron Rouse to the Senate brick wall will help ensure that previous gains are maintained. We're calling on all our Democratic legislators to not back down. But we cannot do this alone. We encourage you to get involved during the legislative session. Your engagement in previous years helped make sure the Virginia Clean Economy Act, clean car standards, and greater protections for reproductive rights were passed. By contacting your legislators, you helped ensure that today we have strong voting rights, protections for the LGBTQ+ community, and criminal justice reform, to name a few. So this year, we are asking you to help us by 1, watching our bill tracker on the Virginia Grassroots Coalition website, and using our easy calls to action to contact legislators about our priority bills. We also ask that you power map yourself so we can let you know when your representative needs to be contacted about an upcoming vote. And finally, there are a number of great lobby days that are planned in Richmond. We hope you will find time to meet with your legislators in person to share your own stories and priorities. You'll be able to find the links to everything in the recap email, and I'm sure our coalition members will be putting them in the chat as well. I want to thank all of our members for their tireless work to advocate for these legislative priorities, and I would like to urge our legislators to take our call to action to not back down seriously. So now I'd like to turn it over to our coalition working group leaders. First up is Amy Bergner. She's a member of the Coalition and leader of WOFA, and she's going to talk to us about clean energy and climate legislation. Over to you, Amy.
Thanks, Louisa. It's just such a thrill to be here for this press conference. And today we want to highlight an issue that hits every single Virginian: electric utility costs. Sounds kind of boring, but here's one we can't back down from. So thanks to the work of Virginia lawmakers led by Senator McClellan and others, Virginia has been in the vanguard of the clean energy transition, addressing climate impacts in our state while making sure this is done in a fair and just manner. Yet because of the power of monopoly utility companies and a hamstrung regulator, Virginians pay some of the highest electric bills in the country. In fact, our bills are the 13th highest in the nation. Since July of 2022, Virginia power companies have raised residential electricity bills by $15 to $30 a month. That's ridiculous. Virginia's primary regulator of electric utilities, the State Corporation Commission, or SCC, has consistently found that major power companies in Virginia overcharge their customers and gain profits above the levels that have been authorized. What's wrong here? In 2021 alone, Dominion overcharged customers by $152 million, right? Wow. And since 2009, Dominion has accumulated nearly, wait for it, $2 billion in overcharges.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah, nothing back to the ratepayers. And unfortunately, the State Corporation Commission is hampered from addressing this imbalance. Since 1992, the legislature has basically tied the hands of the SCC, which has been unable to decrease rates to accurately reflect the cost of electricity here. So for 30 years, we've ceded oversight authority to the very monopolies that should be regulated. The electric power companies are asking the General Assembly for many things in this upcoming session in their own sole interest. But we need to not back down. We need to give power and oversight authority back to regulators and to address this gross imbalance between the power companies and ratepayers. So we're excited to support the Affordable Energy Act, a bipartisan measure that restores power back to the SEC and allows it to order the return of these excess profits back to the people who pay electricity bills. We'll also be supporting bills that aim to advance access to and use of solar energy and study the impact of data centers on our climate. And we look forward to not backing down and defeating every single effort to roll back Virginia's progress on clean energy, including attempts to repeal or cut back on clean car standards, the Virginia Clean Economy Act, and Virginia's participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative.
Well, Amy, thank you so much. And thank you for bringing to our attention, the challenges that we're facing with these energy rates and the monopoly that really, Dominion is holding over the consumers. So I'm wondering, what are the actions folks can take to help support the Affordable Energy Act?
Well, for sure, thanks for the opportunity to share some impactful things that people can do. So sign up for our working group. I'm going to drop the link to our webpage in the chat, and you can find information on signing up there and keep on top of the latest developments and calls to action, which include one-click emails and opportunities to testify at General Assembly hearings. I'll also put in the chat, as you mentioned, lobby days, and there is going to be a lobby day for this Affordable Energy Act on January 26th. A bunch of us are going from Northern Virginia. We'd love to have any and all folks join us for that.
Fantastic. Well, Amy, thank you so much, and definitely put those calls to action in the chat. Just want to reiterate, testifying is so important. And, when these bills are going to be heard in committee. So we are going to provide all the information that is needed to do both written and oral testimony. And so in addition to contacting your legislators, consider testifying if these are issues that are important to you. So Amy, thanks so much. And I'm going to now move on to our next speaker, Marianne Burke, who is a member of the coalition and co-founder and executive team member of For Public Education. Over to you, Marianne.
Thank you, Louisa, and greetings to everyone. The pandemic impacted K-12 students and teachers in many ways, and our legislators stepped up and introduced bills this year to mitigate those impacts. One of the most publicized impacts is what some call learning loss, due to students being forced to attend school online, and we know that the greatest impact has been on rural, low-income, and immigrant communities. We ask legislators to support those bills, including those that address an increase in English language learner resources, introduced by Senator Hashmi, ways to better communicate with parents of English language learners, introduced by Delegate Guzman, and a bill for early intervention services for reading and math, introduced by Senator Favola. Also, the pandemic impacted K-12 students by increasing the need for more mental health services. So our legislators have introduced bills to increase mental health support in our schools, including bills by Senator Spruill, Senator Favola, and Delegate Plum. Our legislators continued their effort to support our public schools with bills to increase compensation for our teachers and support staffs, introduced by Delegate Congress Fowler, Delegate Rasool, who's with us here today, and Senator Lucas. This year, we have bills that intend to increase learning and mentorship opportunities for principals, teachers, and staff, and also reduce the ratios of principals, teachers, and staff to the number of students in each school. Those bills were introduced by Delegate Bourne and Senator McClellan, who also is here today. We're fortunate in Virginia that we now have a surplus in our budget, and we're certain that we have legislators who are advocating for that surplus to go toward public education to solve problems such as overcrowding, deferred maintenance, and inadequate staffing in our public schools. These needs have gone unfulfilled in past years because the budget has not stretched far enough to meet those needs. However, other officials in our executive and legislative branches have designs on that surplus to cut taxes. I hope everyone with a vote realizes that now is the time we can do what is needed for our public schools that are deprived of what they need when budgets are tight.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I think it's really important for us to think critically about how are we using excess budget, right? It isn't something that necessarily, has to go back to the taxpayers. Maybe some of it does, but where are really smart investments that are going to make us a stronger Virginia going forward? So I know people, are seeing some of the challenges that we're having with public education, particularly our school boards at the local level. I'm wondering, what can people be doing? We'll talk a little bit more with Delegate Rasool about the legislation, but what can they be doing at the local level to support some of this public education reform?
Well, on the first, it's actually 2nd of February, people have the opportunity to attend the Board of Education meeting down in Richmond. It's definitely going to be an interesting meeting. I'm speaking there, and a number of other people from For Public Education will be there. The hot topic is the history and social studies standards of learning. Also attend school board meetings and speak up. They are not particularly pleasant because there are a lot of activists who are not very nice oftentimes. Last night I went to one that was particularly problematic, but that way you can give your sense of what is needed and not just let the loud minority speak.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marianne. I think that's really, really important for people to hear. I think, we do have school board members who are dealing with harassment around the positions they're taking. If you have time, going to those meetings to show your support is really, really critical. So Great. Now we're going to move on to our next topic, and we're going to bring up Andy Elders, who is the Policy Director and Board Chair of Justice Forward Virginia, to speak about criminal justice reform. Over to you, Andy.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. As we all know, Virginia made tremendous strides in criminal justice reform in 2020 and 2021 and into 2022. There's still a lot of work to do. There's still a lot more progress to make. Unfortunately, given some of the changes in the General Assembly, we are now in a position where we need to focus on playing defense, but we're not going to back down. We can achieve progress when some legislators want to return to the regressive policies of the past. During this short election year season, we're going to be playing a lot of defense. So I'm going to highlight 4 key issues that we're playing defense on today. The first is pretextual policing. The most common way that individuals interact with police is at traffic stops. And we want people to be safe on Virginia's roads. But because of the war on drugs, people too often use technical violations of law, like a tree air freshener hanging from your rearview mirror or a burned out license plate light, as a reason to stop people. They're not stopping people because those things are unsafe. They're stopping people because they want to know what's in their cars, what's in their pockets. They want to violate their rights. This results in Black people being stopped twice as often as white drivers in Virginia. Now, in the 2020 special, we eliminated many of these reasons. And in the first year after that reform, police stopped 40% fewer Black drivers, which really underscores the nature and the reason for these offenses, whatever they may be officially. Now opponents want to roll back this reform, want to go back to days when police could pull people over because they didn't like the way they looked or they didn't like the neighborhood that they were in. And we're trying to stop them from rolling back that progress for racial justice and equality and dignity for everyone who lives in Virginia. The second item is probation reform. In Virginia, more than twice as many people, as many as 60,000, are on probation as are in Virginia prisons. That's a lot of people with a lot of their liberty being sacrificed for very little reason and very little help to the system. People who violate their probation make up a large portion of Virginia's prison population. So many times when someone violates the terms of their probation, it's for a technical reason, like missing a single appointment or failing a single drug test. People can be, before this reform came in, people could be replaced on probation for 10 years, or in some cases indefinitely on probation for the rest of their lives. In 2021, this law capped supervised probation at 5 years and made it impossible for someone to go to prison for a first offense technical violation or to go to jail for more than 14 days for a second violation for a technical offense. Practitioners like me know that this is dramatically changing the way judges handle probation violations, including making sure that people don't get held for 3 months before they even have a hearing for whether they violated the law in these technical violations. Now opponents have introduced a bill that would repeal these caps on jail time for technical violations, which would mean that thousands of people would spend months in jail in many cases before they could even have their violations heard. And that's something we're not backing down on. The third is mental health evidence at trial. In Virginia, for 60 years, we were outside of the mainstream. The model penal code said that people with mental illness, intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities should be allowed to introduce evidence of their condition at trial to show that they did not have the intent required to commit a crime. In 2021, after 60 years of being out of step with the rest of the country, Virginia finally enacted this common sense reform. Only a year later, even before we know how this is going to play out in Virginia courts, opponents are trying to undo the progress we've made in trying to get people the right to at least tell juries what's going on in their mind when they're charged with criminal offenses. Finally, the presumptions against bail. Most Virginians assume that everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty, but that's not how our bail system used to work. Until 2021, most people accused of certain offenses were held in jail simply because of the accusation against them. Holding people in jail before trial can wreak havoc on a person's life in many ways, affecting housing, employment, child custody, every aspect of their life. And this affects people who turn out to be innocent just the same way that affects people who turn out to be guilty. That's why we have trials, but the law was making it so that judges were almost obligated to punish people before the trial even happened. In 2021, we restored the presumption of innocence by repealing presumptions against bail. Now, opponents want to bring back presumptions so people where there's been no proof against them are held in jail for months or even years before they can have a trial. It's too early to even know some of the effects that these common sense criminal justice reforms will have, but we're not backing down. It's time to protect our progress on criminal justice reform.
Well, Andy, thank you so much for reminding us about the progress that we have made. And I'm wondering quickly, what can folks where can they focus their efforts to make sure this good legislation isn't rolled back?
Well, you can visit Justice Forward Virginia. That's our website, justiceforwardva.com. We do updates. We send out emails with alerts. We have a lobby day coming on February 8th, where we're going to go in person to talk to legislators. And we have a pep rally coming up on January 18th. That's going to be virtual, where we're going to talk about the issues that we're spotlighting. I'll drop all that in the chat. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, Andy. All right, and now I'm going to introduce Nancy Morgan, who is a member of the Coalition and leader of Money Out VA, to discuss campaign finance reform. Over to you, Nancy.
Thank you, Louisa. Hi, everybody. Our nonpartisan group advocates for campaign finance reform. As you may be aware, Virginia has some of the most lax campaign laws in the country, and it's no coincidence that our cost of elections have been skyrocketing over the year. Yet reform, as many of us know, has been notoriously elusive here in Virginia. And we know that money affects all of the issues that we're talking about today, whether it's climate change, education, etc. So last year, nearly 24 bills were introduced, some by Republicans, but of course, the session ended up with a whimper and not with a bang when only 3 bills were passed. This year, we're hopeful, and even though it's a short session, and Robbin, if you want to bring up the slide, let's look at some of the bills that we're looking. There have been 13 bills that have dropped thus far. But when you look at the ones that we're prioritizing, there's improved disclosure bill related to independent expenditures. And that is Barbara Favola's bill that has been, we're really looking at revealing dark money sources. It will be introduced on the House side by Dan Helmer. The elusive restricting personal use of campaign finance. Bipartisan bills are being introduced by Delegates Simon and Mark Cherry on the House side. And we're really excited that Jennifer Boysko is here today, is working on a Senate version. And we think this is a low-hanging fruit that really, I mean, the first thing, this has been introduced for 5 years. We need to get this passed. Capping contribution always comes up. Chap Peterson is introducing his bill. Van Valkenburg has a very interesting bill. And Delegate Tim Anderson, a Republican from the Tidewater, is introducing a bill prohibiting foreign money in our elections. Now, how can anybody vote against that? Anyway, and there's also a resolution supporting an amendment to the US Constitution allowing Congress and the states to regulate election spending, i.e. overturning Citizens United. And thank you, good government champion Delegate Vivian Watts, for that. So let's just cross our fingers that this will be the year of campaign finance reform. And to tell you, we're not backing down and on this good fight. And that's why we need your help. Our advocacy is picking up, and we're putting in the chat a time-sensitive, great call to action that goes to all the members of the P&E committee, the governor, as well as key Republican leadership. So we're asking you to send this, respond to this call to action. It's time sensitive. We're trying to get all of these letters sent this week by Thursday next year. Look at how many people are attending this session. If 100 people sent, just clicked on that bill, 4,000 letters would go out to these people. We can make an impact. So anyway, I just wanted to also say on the good governance side, I wanted to mention that April has been working on this. Delegate Chin has a great bill that will be strengthening regulatory authority of our Ethics Council. And yay, we have 4 ranked choice voting bills, and 2 of whom will hopefully be introduced by legislators. So let's make this the year of good governance. It's a bipartisan issue, and it's a no-brainer for legislators and citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And I think it's really important to highlight that a number of the bills you just talked about are bipartisan. There are opportunities for us to really, create some change in Virginia this year, working across the aisle. So Nancy, if you want to just quickly plug the advocacy day that you're going to have in Richmond, that would be great before we move on.
Sure. We're having a Democracy Day on January 24th, Tuesday, starting off with a rally in the Bell Tower, press conference, sorry. And then we're organizing a full day of action. And this is organized with good governance groups, Fair Vote, Upvote, focused on ranked choice voting, Common Cause is joining us. So we really hope that you come down and join us on that day. But you need to take action on this letter to the editor, because every day counts in our General Assembly. We need to get these bills out of committee, especially on the House side.
All right,
Thanks.
we'll put that call to action in the chat, Nancy, and thank you so much. Now I'd like to introduce ANN LEYKO, who is a member of the coalition, to talk about gender equity. Over to you, ANN.
Thank you, Lisa. I've been working with several groups where we advocate for issues that are of concern to women and families. I've been working with the Women's Issue Group of Defend Democracy Nova, as well as FCDC Women's Caucus, as well as folks from Loudoun County. I want to display a slide. Stair, if you could put up the slide that I submitted to let the audience know the bills that we are monitoring. There are 3 bills there that are asterisked. Those bills that are asterisked have been submitted and introduced by Lisa Sowles, president of Virginia Now, where you may have heard about these bills in a different venue. Please support these bills so that we can move forward with each other on the issues that these bills are trying to solve. But the bill that I would like to talk to you about today is SB 1248. This bill is sponsored by Louise Lucas. It is requiring corporations that request tax breaks or incentives from the state of Virginia to have gender balanced and diverse boards. The concept is the presence of women and diverse groups on boards will be more likely to advocate for paid family medical leave, child care arrangements, as well as actionable sexual harassment policies. We have been interested in this concept for about 5 years now. Now, bills requiring gender balance and diverse corporate boards have been proposed or legislated in 13 states, both Democratic and Republican state houses. Our research has shown that gender balance and diverse boards can be very beneficial to corporations. They outperform other companies. They do well during recessions. They are more profitable. They're less risk averse. They carry less debt. And as an example, review the board composition of Amazon. It is gender balanced and diverse, and no one can argue with the success of that company. Additionally, the NASDAQ has issued a ruling that if your company does not have gender balanced and diverse boards, they will not list your company on the exchange. The feeling is that boards need to be reflective of their investors, their customers, and their employees. And it should also be noted that most of the IT companies and the biotech companies are listed on the NASDAQ and not on the New York Stock Exchange. This requirement of having gender balance and diverse boards will cost corporations nothing. State laws require corporations have boards, so it is part of their budget. On the state level, the demographics of board compositions would be monitored in an annual report to the Major Employment Investment Projects Commission, where corporations would need to submit an annual report. Most importantly, in the post-pandemic environment, it is believed that women's and minority will have the skills that are necessary for maintaining corporate growth, since this is the group that is reflective of investors, customers, as well as employees. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, ANN. Well, I want to congratulate you on getting this bill on gender equity and diversity introduced. And I'm wondering, what is one thing that folks can do to help support the passage of the bill?
Well, the bill, while it is in the Labor of Commerce Committee, it has been referred to the Senate Rules Committee, for which Senator Mamie Locke is the chair. So what I would suggest is to write to not only to Senator Locke, but also members on the Senate Rules Committee. Once it gets out of committee and possibly can be voted on the floor, then to contact your senator and delegate for passage. And also this bill will be listed on the Virginia Grassroots Coalition website. So you can find out there how this bill will progress.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for bringing that and those other bills to our attention. And we'll make sure to track those on the website.
Thank you. Good.
All right, everyone. I'm going to finally introduce Kathleen Murray, who is a member of the coalition and leader of WOFA, to share bills on gun violence prevention. Over to you, Kathleen.
Thanks, Louisa, and thanks everyone for showing up. What a great turnout. So, like many of us have already spoken about our, great strides that we made in the previous two sessions. The Virginia Assembly passed numerous gun safety and gun violence prevention legislation. Just to name a few: universal background checks, reporting requirements for lost or stolen firearms, limit of one handgun purchase per month, and extreme risk protection orders. So as we all know, with the GOP majority in the House of Delegates and the Dem in the Virginia Senate, we're likely to see a lot of stalemates on the gun legislation front. However, there is some great legislation out there, and some of it's very sensible and could possibly appeal to both sides. Particularly, I'd like to Senator Jennifer Boysko, who is in the room. Thank you for this wonderful Senate Bill 1139, which is the firearm storage in residence. And I just actually, hang on, I'm putting it in the chat right now, which is going to require any person who possesses a firearm in a residence where such person knows or reasonably should know that a minor under 18 years of age is present, they need to store their firearm unloaded and locked in a locked container. So in light of the recent tragedy in Virginia, this legislation is beyond timely, and it's a very strong bill. And additionally, there's, over 70, I don't know if you've heard the 97%.org. These are gun owners. And evidently over 75, they asked 75% of the gun owners favored a requirement that gun owners safely store their guns in a gun safe or equip them with a trigger lock. So there's definitely support for that. And the statistics are in the press release. And then there's just another bill, and I'd like to go back to Boysko's bill, Senator Boysko's bill. We do have some companion bills coming out of the House that are very good and complement it. So we're going to push that. And I ask everyone to go to the call to action that I just put in the chat. That would be great. And just there's another one which is interesting. Rip Sullivan's House Bill 1579, firearms purchases. If anyone who's within a 5-year period has been convicted for 2 misdemeanor driving or boating DUIs, they'll be ineligible to purchase or transport a handgun. So the bottom line is, yes, we're not going to back down. We're going to keep our gains, and we're going to work towards some sensible gun legislation and support them. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen. And thank you for putting that call to action in the chat where people can take action already on Senator Boysko's bill. I'm excited to call this piece of the press conference to a close, and we're now going to move on to a panel with some of our legislators to hear from them about their priority legislation, and then also just get a sense what they're expecting from the session. So
Jennifer Boysko just came back in, and Sam just came in. So give us a second to get them on the screen, but we can start with the next Congresswoman from Virginia.
Well, Senator McClellan, I'm so excited to see you. And of course, congratulations, since I haven't seen you in person, on the primary win. We are really pleased to have been working with you for the past 2 years on putting together legislation on reforming the recall process in Virginia. We didn't get a chance to highlight it yet, so I was hoping you could tell us just a little bit about the bill and why it's important.
Sure. Well, thank you, Louisa, and thank the Grassroots Coalition for your work on this bill, which started really 2 years ago when we started to see the recall process really being abused and used to harass duly elected officials, particularly our school board members, not exclusively. We've seen it grow past that. And even people who legitimately wanted to use the process. It was cumbersome, it was confusing. And so the Grassroots Coalition really dug in, looked at Virginia's process, looked at what other states do, and came up with a bill last year that didn't quite make it. And so this year we streamlined it even further to just focus on a couple of simple ideas. It should not be harder to get on the ballot than to remove someone from office, number one. And number two, if in a democracy, in a government by, of, and for the people who put someone in office should be the people who decide whether that person should be removed. So what the bill will do, and we don't have sort of the same kind of recall process in Virginia as they do in, say, California. So let me start there. The recall process in Virginia really is, once you're in office, have you committed a crime? Have you committed a crime against the office that you hold? Have you really done something that's either so neglectful or shown incompetence that you have really violated the trust of your office that the people put in you when you were elected? It's not just, do we disagree with votes you've taken, or do we just not like you? It really is, have you violated the trust of your office? And so what this bill would do is say, to initiate a recall, whoever is sponsoring that recall would have to follow a prescribed process and timeline to submit an application and a petition signed by the required number of qualified voters, which we changed to mirror a little bit more closely to what it takes to get on the ballot. The general registrar would review both the applications and the petitions to see, have you met the legal threshold? Do you have the required number of qualified voters? Have you previously tried to do this on the same grounds? And then at the next general election, which is another difference, the next general election, if they've met all of those criteria, then the recall question would be on the ballot. Right now, it's a court case where even, the right and the left who have participated in this process agree, we don't understand how this process works. We don't understand the criteria. We really need this to be simple. So the bill does not change the existing legal grounds for removing an official. It wouldn't require our localities to incur additional costs because the recall would be part of a regularly scheduled election. And again, it puts the power back in the hands of the voters. The same people who put someone in office would be the ones to decide whether they should be removed. It increases the petition signatures from 10% of the registered, actually from 10% of the total number of votes cast in the last election to 30%. 10% is often within the margin of victory in many elections. And so what you see happen is, if someone wins by less than 10% of the vote, then people say, or around 10% of the vote, then people will say, oh, well, all we got to do is recall them. And they can start that process before they're even in office. So this really takes the recall process out of being a political tool that can be used to harass elected officials that someone disagrees with, and puts it back to what it's supposed to be. And that is a tool that can be used to remove someone who has violated the trust of their office. So very simple bill. We probably tried to cut off more than we could chew last year because it's a new concept last year. A lot of people were really confused, but the more we explained it on both sides of the aisle, the more people said, that really makes sense. So I am hopeful
that with your help and with your advocacy, we will be able to get this bill across the finish line this year.
Yeah, well, Jennifer, we really appreciate it. We really enjoyed working with you on this bill, and there is a lot of work to do. I think we issued something like 3 or 4 calls to action on it last year just to get it out of the Senate into the House. So please, everyone, keep a lookout, because this is something that's really important and does impact, our school board members. It impacts our Commonwealth attorneys, all of those people who this process has been used to harass. We want it to really go back to something that the voters can trust in. So thank you so much. I'm going to come back to you after we talk to the other two to get a sense of the session itself. But Delegate Rasool, since I see you on, we talked earlier a little bit about some of the bills on education reform, and I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about your bill on teacher compensation and other ways that we can better serve rural areas in the area of education.
Well, it's great to be with you all. A note about the coalition and the power of the coalition. The Democratic Party in particular, my party, is a party that is a coalition. And so sometimes when we talk about unity, look, we're never going to be completely unified. And that's not really the nature of politics. It's about building coalitions between lots of different groups and people at the table. And hats off to the Grassroots Coalition, Northern Virginia, and Network Nova, who's been able to artfully do that. With regards to education, the big bill that we're pushing, I'm carrying it in the House, Senator Lucas in the Senate, is to finally pay our teachers at the national average. Now is the day to do it. We have a great amount of funds that are surplus. Last year, we put $4 billion into our savings, which is, we've never been able to do anything like that. Before was a little over $1 billion was the most we've ever done. We also gave $4 billion in tax breaks. So we've done the tax breaks, we've saved the money. Now we have even more of a surplus. We have an awesome opportunity to be able to invest in public education. Senator McClellan's been working on fully funding the SOQs. My bill is specific around teacher pay and bringing that to the national average, which should be the floor as one of the richest states in the nation. And then 2 other bills, which were JLARC recommendations that came through the Behavioral Health Commission, which reflect the impact on COVID with regards to K-12. One will be what we do with regards to school counselors. Right now, our school counselors, unfortunately, are spending a lot of time not counseling because schools use them to do other things, test administration, so on. So our bill, which was a recommendation from the commission, will say that 80%, as defined by the bill, of their time should be spent counseling. And then a separate bill will say that we need to focus on expanding school psychologists by broadening who we can bring into the fold. And so these recommendations will help folks all across Virginia. But I can tell you here in kind of Southwest Virginia, this has been quite an issue for us to deal with.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Delegate Rasool, for the work that you're doing on this. It's clear that I think we all know public education suffered during COVID-19, and we haven't found ways to necessarily get back to where we were before. So some of these bills are going to be really critical in helping us take those important steps. And just in terms of teacher compensation, it's something that if we want to have good teachers across the board, across our state, we need to make sure that we're paying them equitably. So really, really appreciate that. And Senator Boysko, thank you so much for joining us. I also want to thank you for being a chief co-patron of the recall bill with Senator McClellan. But what I'd love to hear about from you today is I know that you have a gun violence prevention bill on safe storage. Kathleen Murray told us a little bit about it, but I'd love if you could just share a little bit more with us about why you think this is so important.
Sure. Well, I thank you all for having me today. And there are Moms Demand action all over the campus today. I met with the group from Loudoun County just a few minutes ago, and we're getting a lot of good visibility. The sad thing is that the number one cause of death for children in Virginia and in the United States has now become gun violence prevention, gun violence. More kids die from gun violence than die from an illness, from an accident, from anything else. And it is an epidemic. We've got to do something about it. Just yesterday, I was in one of the hearings where one of the senators had a bill talking about how dangerous books are and how the children needed to be protected from them. Well, I think guns are what is dangerous, and children need to be protected from them. So my bill does not address the Second Amendment. It simply requires that if you know or have reason to know that there are going to be children under the age of 18 in your vicinity, in your home, and as soon as you take the gun off of your person, you have to store it, take the ammunition and store it elsewhere, and the child does not have access to the keys. It's really simple and really common sense, and it is very popular. People are very excited about it. We know that we can really make a difference in other states where this has happened. It has reduced deaths. And over the past decade, we've seen a 129% increase in child deaths. 40% of that is suicide. And a lot of those are coming from those 40% are from gun violence. So it's time to stop talking about being protective of children and do something about it. And I thank you all for your advocacy for it.
Yeah, and thank you for your leadership on introducing this bill. I want to wrap up this panel discussion just by asking each of you, what should we expect from this legislative session? And you can take that in whatever direction you'd like, but I'll start with you, Senator McClellan.
Well, the good news is that we expanded the Senate brick wall by adding Aaron Rouse. So thank you to everybody that helped make that happen. So with 2218, I am even more confident that we will fight efforts to roll back the progress that we made over the 2 years that we were in the majority on all of the issues you've talked about today and more. I do think we'll be able to find areas for common ground and pushing forward. And I do think we'll find success on some of the bills that we've heard here today. And on some of them, if not, we're going to keep on pushing. And but I think particularly on K-12 funding, on investing in our mental health system, I know those are two areas we should be able to find some common ground on, but I think we in the Senate are firmly standing together to fight any efforts to roll back the progress that we made in 2020 and 2021.
Well, great. And we appreciate the Senate brick wall. I think you missed our opening song, but it was "We Won't Back Down." And we feel like that is a great theme for this legislative session. And we appreciate all the work that you're doing to be part of that wall, and also the progress that we do think we can potentially make this year. I think people know that there are elections coming up this year, and hopefully that encourages legislators to think about, well, what is the platform that they want to be associated with when they are running. So Delegate Rasool, would love to hear from your side, thinking about maybe what's happening in the House. What should we expect this year?
Well, in an election year, certainly there'll be a lot of headlines. However, the overwhelming majority of bills that will pass and by definition actually will have to be bipartisan in nature. Echoing some of what Senator McClellan was saying, certainly there is I think a push on both sides to try to increase education funding, specifically teacher pay, hopefully, and mental health, behavioral health issues. For me, a substance use disorder is something that is a heavy focus for my session. I think it really hit home when I mentioned to someone yesterday that the number of people we've lost to substance use disorder over the past 2 years is equal to essentially 2 Vietnams. And it's a crisis for sure of a large proportion that sometimes just gets lost, maybe because it isn't one of the sexier headlines. But the good news is that I believe that there is some bipartisan support for these initiatives as we try to figure out how the state can be more involved in something called residential treatment. So this is to help someone who's in a transition phase. There's just such a shortage. And this is something that we've seen rich, poor, rural, urban, a lot of legislators come together on.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. And that statistic is just kind of mind blowing. And I'm really glad that it looks like there'll be some opportunities to work across the aisle on this topic this year. And Senator Boysko, what should we expect?
Sure. So I associate myself with the comments made by my colleagues. I think we're going to be doing a lot of defense. When the governor was giving his State of the Union of the Commonwealth, he claimed that he was going to be bringing Virginia out of the darkness. And I don't know what darkness he's been hiding under, but we feel like we've had a lot of sunlight and a lot of prosperity and a lot of good stuff going on. So I expect that in addition to the progress that we hope to make on a bipartisan measure on education and on mental health, that we're going to be fighting to preserve the work that we did on the environment, on our criminal justice reform, on protection for the most vulnerable people, and on equality. And we are ready for the fight. Jennifer McClellan and I both have on our red today. We are ready for the battle, but we will work collaboratively where we can. And we will do all of it with grace and kindness and dignity. The three of us, I think you will agree, try to treat everybody with respect. And, we really try to be stewards of public service instead of throwing bombs at people that we disagree with. And I appreciate you all for all you do. You've really made a huge difference. Looking forward to working with you in the future. And thank you for inviting us here to talk.
Thank you. What we want to do now is move into our Q&A section. And if there are other legislators who happen to be in the room, Robbin, feel free to bring them up. But either way, we've got some good questions that I'm going to share with you guys from the chat. And the first one is from Melissa Hartman, and the question is for Delegate Rasool. She asks, can school safety be rolled into your bill on improving school mental health counseling? She says, if we reach young people and help them through issues, we could potentially avoid future safety issues. Wondering what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I think specifically, if you look at the bill, it's goes through and meticulously defines what is counseling and considered counseling. And so hopefully you'll have a chance to take a look at it and see what some of your thoughts may be, because we want to ensure that our counselors can be as targeted as possible. So there's clearly room there. The JLARC report showed that there not only is a shortage, but it's not, what we're doing is not targeted. A shortage in counselors, but also the counseling that we're doing is not targeted. So there's certainly room for us to be able to improve.
Thank you. And we've got another question from Mary Ann Burke for Senator Boysko. She says, you were so helpful in getting the Good Samaritan bill passed a couple of years ago. What are we going to do about the bill that is trying to roll back protections for overdosing people? Don't you think that if it passes, that more people will die because they are afraid of getting arrested?
Marianne, thank you for the question. And it's very timely because we're going to be hearing it in the judiciary meeting on Monday morning. I've already put the alert out to some of the advocates that I know, but it's really important that you communicate with legislators to make sure they understand that criminalizing addiction behavior and substance abuse doesn't help. The statistics just are not there. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to dispense with that bill on Monday, but I'm not completely confident. Please call legislators, use your voice. We will be able to take testimony through Zoom. And I ask you to reach out to everybody you know who has a stake in this. We're now calling it the Recovery Services, Addiction Recovery Services Council. We have made a statement that says we oppose any sort of criminalization of recovery efforts or of substance abuse dealings, and we need your help. It's really serious.
Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing that to our attention, that it's happening on Monday. And it just as a reminder to people, because you can testify via Zoom, please take advantage of that. You don't necessarily have to be in Richmond. And that's something that's happened since COVID. And it's a really great carryover that we still have that as an opportunity. So thank you so much, Senator. We've also got a question from Julie Galdo for either Senator Boysko or McClellan. And she asks, do you know if there is legislation to ban automatic weapons that's being introduced this year? Go ahead, Senator Boysko. You nod your head.
Yes, so Senator Creed will be carrying legislation that would bring us back to the 1996 laws where automatic weapons would be banned. And he believes that it would be, this has been the law in the past and it is constitutional, would hold muster.
Yeah, wonderful. So that's great. And we'll make sure to look out for that. I'm just going to end with one more question, and then we're going to, after this question, wrap it up and move on to the after chat. For anyone who wants to stay, we'll continue to have conversation based on some of the questions that are in the chat. But this last question is from Max Sawicki and Camden Weber. Looks like they're from Next Gen, and they will want to know, are there any free tuition bills that are being pushed this session?
So we are trying to put in place more state funding for our higher ed institutions, because frankly, the reason the tuition has gone up is because Virginia does not pay its fair share. Senator Sassaw in the Finance Committee the other day made a really good point that it used to be the policy in Virginia that I think maybe 1/3 of tuition was paid by the student and families, and 2/3 was paid for the state, and now it's reversed. And so we are going to try to put more money in the higher ed institutions so that then the institutions could have more students who get free tuition or more financial aid. I am not aware of any bills directly to make tuition free for everyone. But there is, it is just a fact that unless the state puts more money in to pay the cost of higher ed, then that cost will lie on the backs of our students. And that's the opposite of how it should be. So we want to make sure we get state investment in higher ed up.
Yeah, as a university professor, I completely understand the burden that we're putting on our next generations when we don't take this really seriously. So that is really good to know. Thank you for sharing that, Senator. All right, so it is the top of the hour, so we are going to call this press conference to a close and stop the recording. I want to thank everyone for being here with us and encourage you to stay for the after chat where we can have more conversation, potentially more candid conversation about all of these bills and the work that it's going to take going forward over the next 2 months. But thank you all again, and look forward to working with you this legislative session.